In a world where silence echoes louder than words, a combat medic turned recluse finds herself facing her greatest battle yet. Not on a battlefield, but in a dog show ring. With only her loyal German shepherd by her side, she must overcome her darkest fears and the haunting scars of war. But when victory comes within reach, her dog vanishes without a trace, and the fight for healing turns into a fight for survival. Can she reclaim what was taken, or will the shadows of her past pull her under once more? If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. Emily Turner stood at the edge of the dog show ring, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the leash on her dog Thunder. At 60 years old, she didn't look like the other competitors. The polished blazers, the camera-ready dogs, and the audience with their designer leashes all stood in stark contrast to her. Emily wore a simple jacket, one that had seen its fair share of battles much like herself. Her gray hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her face was marked with years of experiences most people couldn't even imagine. Her eyes, though, were calm, almost too calm, as she stood beside her loyal German shepherd. The judges didn't expect her to win, not with the flashy dogs parading around her, with their perfectly trained performances and gleaming coats. Not with Grant Mallory standing among the panel, a renowned judge known for his strict standards and unyielding opinions about who truly belonged in the elite world of canine competition. They had already decided who would take the prize, and it wasn't going to be Emily Turner. But Emily wasn't here for a trophy. She wasn't here for validation either. The audience couldn't know that. The judges couldn't know that, and most of all, she couldn't let Thunder know that. No, she was here for a different reason entirely. One that had nothing to do with ribbons or recognition. Her battle had been fought long before she ever stepped into this ring. Emily had once been a soldier, a medic. She had patched up the broken bodies of soldiers in places most people wouldn't even dare to think about. She had worked under fire, in the thick of dust storms, and during the dead of night when the world was nothing but silence and screams. For over 20 years she had been in a war, not of her choosing. And when that war ended, it didn't end the way it did for most people. Honorably discharged at 54, Emily returned to her small hometown in Oregon. What she had hoped would be a peaceful, quiet life was instead filled with endless silence. The quiet that once seemed like a blessing soon became too loud for her. The memories of her time in combat haunted her, each one echoing through the stillness of her home. The nightmares didn't wait long to return, nor did the panic attacks. It started as a tightness in her chest, then the cold sweats, and before she could understand what was happening, her heart would race, and she would be back in the middle of the chaos, hearing the sirens, feeling the shrapnel hit, listening to the screams of her fellow soldiers. It wasn't just in her dreams anymore. The flashes would come when she was awake too. She had avoided crowds, avoided loud places, avoided anything that might bring it all back. But the memories never truly left. They had settled deep within her, forming a part of her she couldn't shake off. It was during one of these aimless drives through the outskirts of town that Emily found him. A stray dog, a German shepherd, soaked to the bone from the rain, limping from an old injury, lying next to a flooded ditch. His ribs were showing through his matted coat, and his eyes were tired, but they were alert, watching her. Emily didn't need to ask questions. She didn't need to know his past. The dog's weary gaze told her everything she needed to know. He had seen his own kind of war. Without a word, she opened the back of her truck and said softly, "You're not dying. Out here, not tonight." The dog climbed in without a sound. Emily didn't know it then, but that broken dog would be the one steady thing in her life. The one thing that would help her begin to heal the pieces of herself she thought she had lost forever. She named him Thunder. At first, it was just the two of them, Emily and Thunder. They shared quiet days and even quieter nights. They didn't speak the same language, but they understood each other in a way words could never convey. Thunder's calm presence seemed to soothe her, and in turn, Emily's quiet acceptance of him began to heal his own wounds. She had been through a war, and so had he. They were both survivors marked by their pasts but still standing. Thunder wasn't just a dog. He was a companion. He was a mirror, reflecting everything Emily had gone through, the things she had buried deep within herself. Thunder didn't judge her. He didn't force her to talk or to explain her silence. He simply was. And in that simplicity, Emily began to find peace again. But healing was never easy. Not for Emily, not for Thunder. And not for Lily, her 10-year-old granddaughter who had come to live with her after the sudden death of her own mother. Lily arrived one afternoon with a suitcase too big for her tiny frame and eyes that had already seen more than a child should. She didn't know Emily well. She didn't know Thunder at all. But grief, Emily understood, had a language of its own. And soon Lily and Thunder formed a bond that was as quiet and healing as Emily's had been. The three of them, though broken in their own ways, began to find their way back to each other. It wasn't just a dog show for Emily. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something deeper. The fear of standing before a crowd, of being judged and ridiculed, was overwhelming. Yet in Thunder's calm gaze, Emily began to see a chance at redemption. The competition wasn't about trophies or approval. It was about taking that first step back into the world, not as a soldier, not as a medic, but as a woman who had lived through hell and had earned the right to stand tall again. As the crowd murmured and the judges glanced at each other, Emily stood in the center of the ring, Thunder beside her. They had no expectations. Neither of them needed the approval of the world. What they needed was to take that first step forward, to show the world, and more importantly themselves, that they had survived and they were still here. The battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning. As the days passed, Emily and Thunder fell into a quiet routine. Their connection was not born out of words, but of shared silences and unspoken understanding. It was the kind of bond that neither of them could have predicted, yet it was exactly what both of them needed. Emily, still struggling with the remnants of her past, found comfort in Thunder's steady presence. He wasn't a perfect dog, far from it, but in his imperfections, Emily saw her own struggles reflected. And in those moments, she allowed herself to breathe. Thunder had scars of his own. His ribs showed through his matted coat and his gait was uneven from the injuries he had suffered. Emily had taken him in without hesitation, no questions asked. There was something about his gaze that told her he understood pain, understood survival. He didn't judge her for the moments when her hands trembled or when the panic attacks returned. He simply sat beside her, his warm body a constant reassurance. Their days were simple. They took long walks around the quiet streets of the small town, Emily's feet brushing against the dirt paths as Thunder trotted beside her, his eyes scanning the world with a quiet alertness. Sometimes they sat together on the porch, watching the world go by in a peaceful silence. Emily often found herself lost in thought, but Thunder was always there, his head resting on her feet, as if grounding her in the present. It was during one of these walks that Emily's life took another, unexpected turn. She had just returned from a grocery run when she found her granddaughter Lily, sitting on the porch with a suitcase too big for her small frame. The little girl's eyes were puffy, her face pale as she clutched the suitcase tightly in her hands. Emily's heart sank when she realized the weight of the situation. Lily's mother, Emily's daughter, had passed away suddenly, leaving the young girl without anyone else to turn to. Emily had not seen her granddaughter in years, and the pain of their reunion was a sharp reminder of the losses they both carried. Lily had nowhere else to go, and without a word she had come to live with Emily. It wasn't the life Emily had imagined for herself, but it was the life she had now. The first few days were difficult. Lily didn't speak much, and Emily didn't know how to console her. She tried, of course, but the words never seemed to come out right. She knew what it felt like to lose someone, but how could she explain that to a child who had already lost so much? All Emily could offer was her presence, her silent companionship. She wasn't perfect, but she was there. It didn't take long for Lily to find solace in Thunder. The dog, who had once been Emily's only companion, seemed to have found a new purpose. Every day Lily would sit with him, resting her head against his side as he lay quietly beside her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Lily's hand would gently stroke his fur, her fingers tracing the contours of his body as if searching for something she couldn't name. Thunder didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply stayed, his eyes soft and watchful, as if he understood the grief that weighed on the child's heart. Emily watched this silent exchange between the two, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her granddaughter was grieving in ways Emily could never understand. She wished she could do more for Lily, but the girl seemed to draw comfort from Thunder in ways that Emily could not provide, and for that, Emily was grateful. Thunder, too, seemed to find something in Lily that he hadn't had before. It was as if the dog understood the pain the little girl carried, and in his quiet way, he offered her the same thing he had offered Emily: comfort, reassurance, and an understanding that only survivors know. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As the days turned into weeks, Emily noticed subtle changes in Lily. She started drawing again. Her sketchbook, which had been abandoned for months, began to fill with drawings of Thunder, running, resting, watching. She even began to draw Emily, though always from behind, as if afraid to look her in the eye. It broke Emily's heart to see the pain in those drawings, but it also gave her hope. It was a sign that Lily was starting to process the world around her, even if it was only through the safety of her sketchpad. One night, after Emily woke from a nightmare, drenched in sweat and shaking with fear, Lily came into her room carrying her sketchbook. She looked up at Emily with wide eyes, her voice soft but steady. "You were crying," she said, almost as if she had known. "I heard you." Emily didn't know how to respond. She didn't want to burden Lily with her own pain, but she couldn't deny the truth. Lily had already seen it. She had seen the cracks in Emily's armor, the moments when the weight of the past seemed too much to bear. But what Lily said next hit Emily harder than any of her nightmares ever had. Lily opened the sketchbook and showed Emily a drawing of her and Thunder curled up together on the floor, as if the dog had become her shield against the darkness. "I drew you like this," Lily said softly, "because you're not alone, Grandma. You have him." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to believe them. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. She had Thunder, and now she had Lily too. The bond between the three of them wasn't just about survival. It was about healing, about finding hope in the darkest of places. And with Thunder by her side, Emily felt the smallest flicker of hope begin to grow within her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Together they were learning how to heal, how to move forward one day at a time. And Emily realized with quiet gratitude that sometimes the most unexpected bonds are the ones that save us. The days that followed Emily's quiet moment with Lily and Thunder marked the beginning of something unexpected. As much as Emily had been content in the quiet rhythm of her life with Thunder, the idea of truly healing was still a distant thought. But then Lily, with her unrelenting optimism, planted a seed in Emily's heart. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the golden light of the setting sun fade into the sky, Lily turned to Emily with a sparkle in her eyes. "Grandma," she said, her voice filled with excitement, "there's a dog training competition next month. I think Thunder could win." Emily chuckled, shaking her head. "Thunder barely listens to me half the time, honey," she said, her tone light, trying to hide the uncertainty that crept up within her. "And besides, it's not just about winning." But Lily didn't back down. Her belief in Thunder and in Emily was unwavering. "It's not about winning, Grandma. It's about showing everyone how amazing he is, how amazing both of you are." Emily hesitated. The very idea of standing before a crowd, of putting herself in the spotlight, sent waves of anxiety crashing over her. The thought of being judged, of all those eyes watching her, triggered something deep within. It wasn't just about a dog competition. It was about facing the crowd, the noise, the overwhelming feelings she had spent years avoiding. But Lily's hopeful face, her eager eyes, made Emily pause. Maybe this wasn't just about Thunder. Maybe, just maybe, It was about reclaiming a piece of herself she had lost long ago. After some quiet contemplation, Emily agreed. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's do it." The decision wasn't easy. The competition was still a month away, and Emily knew that preparing for it would mean stepping out of her comfort zone. Thunder had never been trained for such an event, and Emily had never imagined herself standing before judges, much less competing in front of a crowd. But the idea of doing something for herself, of taking control of her life again, became the driving force behind her actions. The training began, and it was harder than Emily had anticipated. Each morning she and Lily would wake up early, and together they would work on Thunder's commands. Emily's hands, once so steady under the pressure of life or death situations, as a medic, now trembled with every move Thunder made. His attention span was short, and often he would wander off mid-command, leaving Emily feeling defeated. But every time Thunder responded, no matter how small the success, Emily felt a flicker of hope. Thunder wasn't the only one struggling. Emily's PTSD, which had once seemed to only affect her in moments of solitude, now crept into her training sessions. The loud sounds of Thunder's collar clinking, the sudden barking of other dogs in the neighborhood, the rush of the wind, each moment felt like an assault on her senses. But she didn't stop. Not this time. She couldn't afford to. Lily became their unofficial coach. She would cheer them on, her enthusiasm never wavering, even when the days felt long and progress seemed slow. She was there to encourage Thunder when Emily couldn't, and she was there to remind Emily that every step, no matter how small, was a victory. With Lily's support, Emily began to push through the fog of anxiety. She started seeing Thunder's progress as her own. Each new command he mastered, each trick he learned, felt like a step forward in her own healing. One morning, after a particularly difficult session, Emily found herself sitting on the porch, hands shaking as she sipped her tea. Her chest was tight, and her mind raced with memories she had worked so hard to forget. The sounds of war, the faces of soldiers she couldn't save, the weight of her past, it all came rushing back in a flash. For a moment, Emily thought she might drown in it all. But then Thunder, sensing her distress, walked over to her, his head resting gently on her lap. His calm eyes looked up at her, and in that moment, something inside Emily softened. He wasn't just a dog. He was a lifeline. He had been with her through the darkest moments of her life, and now, as she prepared for the competition, he was her anchor, keeping her grounded when everything else seemed to be slipping away. That night, as Emily lay in bed, the familiar weight of the past pressing on her chest, she thought of Lily's words. It wasn't just about winning. It was about showing herself, showing Lily, and showing the world that she wasn't broken. That she could still live again. Emily didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she had come this far, and that in itself was a triumph. The next morning they trained again, but this time there was something different in Emily's movements. She wasn't just going through the motions, she was present, focused, determined. Thunder responded to her with a new energy, as if he too understood that this wasn't just about obedience. It was about something far more profound. A chance at healing, at rediscovering a piece of themselves that had been lost. Every day they grew stronger together. Thunder's training continued to improve, and Emily's confidence, once shattered by years of silence and fear, began to rebuild itself piece by piece. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't have a perfect dog, but she had something even more important, a chance. A chance to reclaim her life, to be the person she had once been, and to show Lily that healing was possible, no matter how broken you felt. As the days ticked down to the competition, Emily realized that this was about more than just a dog show. It was about overcoming the fears that had held her back for so long. It was about moving forward even when the past tried to pull her back, and most of all, it was about healing, not just for her but for the ones she loved most. They weren't just preparing for a competition, they were preparing for a new beginning. The day of the competition arrived, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The dog show arena was filled with the noise of barking dogs, the chatter of excited spectators, and the unmistakable scent of competition in the air. Emily stood on the edge of the ring, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted Thunder's leash. The lights were bright and the crowd's murmurs grew louder with every passing moment. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment she felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. Thunder, however, stood beside her, calm and collected. His steady gaze never wavered. It was as if he could sense her nerves. And in that silent moment between them, Emily realized something important. Thunder had been with her through everything. The loneliness, the silence, the pain. And now, together, they were about to face the one thing that had terrified her for so long. The world outside of her safe little bubble. As the announcer called out the start of the competition, Emily took a deep breath. She had come this far and there was no turning back. This wasn't just about winning a ribbon or gaining approval. This was about showing herself and everyone else that she was more than her past, that she could stand tall despite all the fears that had held her down for so long. This was a battle for her own healing, her own freedom. The other competitors, some of them with their polished dogs and perfect routines, gave Emily curious glances as she stepped into the ring. They had expected her to stumble, to falter. After all, she didn't fit their image of a dog show champion. But Emily wasn't here to prove anything to them. She was here to prove something to herself. Thunder moved with her in perfect sync, his movements graceful, precise, and calm. Every command Emily gave was met with an eager response. Thunder executed each trick with a natural ease that surprised even Emily. It was as if they had become one, their bond so strong that the world around them faded away. There were no crowds, no judges, no distractions. There was just Emily and Thunder doing what they had trained for, what they had fought for. As Emily gave Thunder a final command, she could feel the energy of the crowd shift. They weren't just watching a woman and her dog, they were witnessing something deeper. Emily wasn't just performing a routine, she was showing the world that healing was possible, that no matter how broken someone felt, they could still rise above it all. The competition ended, and the judges began to announce the results. Emily's heart raced, but she didn't care about the outcome. What mattered was that she had done it. She had faced her fears, stepped into the ring, and let go of the past. Thunder had become more than a companion. He had become a symbol of resilience, of the strength that came from surviving the hardest battles, both seen and unseen. When the announcer called Emily's name and declared that she and Thunder had won first place, the crowd erupted into applause. But Emily hardly noticed. She looked down at Thunder, who was standing tall beside her, his tail wagging slightly. In that moment, she didn't need a ribbon. She didn't need anyone else's validation. She had found something much more valuable: peace, strength, and a sense of purpose. As Emily hugged Lily tightly, tears welling in her eyes, she realized that this victory was more than just a dog show win. It was a triumph of the spirit. It was proof that healing was not only possible, but also transformative. It was proof that no matter how broken someone was, they could still find their way back to themselves just as she had. But as Emily made her way off the stage with Thunder by her side, she noticed someone standing near the judge's tent. A man in a suede jacket, arms crossed, was watching them intently. His gaze was cold, calculating, and something about the way he observed them sent a shiver down Emily's spine. He didn't clap or smile like the others. Instead, his eyes seemed to be sizing them up as if he were trying to figure out something deeper. Emily didn't know who he was, but something in his look made her uneasy. She pushed the thought aside, choosing instead to focus on the moment at hand. She had fought too hard to let anything steal her joy, but the feeling lingered in the back of her mind, a nagging whisper that wouldn't quite go away. 2 days later, Emily woke up to an eerie silence. Thunder, who was usually by her side in the morning, was nowhere to be found. His leash, usually hanging by the door, was gone. Panic surged in her chest as she called out for him, but the house remained still. Lily's face, pale and wide-eyed, told Emily everything she needed to know. Thunder was missing. They searched. The neighborhood put up flyers and made countless phone calls. Nothing. It was as if Thunder had vanished into thin air. Emily's heart broke with every passing hour. She had already lost so much, her fellow soldiers, her peace, her sense of self, and now it felt as though she was losing Thunder too. The bond they shared, the one thing that had kept her grounded, was suddenly torn away. But Emily wasn't about to give up. Not on Thunder, not on herself. She gathered her strength as she had done countless times before and began to piece together the puzzle. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her bones. Thunder didn't run away. He didn't just disappear. In the days that followed, Emily's resolve grew stronger. She didn't know who had taken Thunder, but she was going to find out. The person who thought they could break her didn't understand the strength that had been forged in the fire of war and loss. Emily wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. And she wasn't going to let anything take away the one thing that had saved her. As she prepared to take the next step, Emily realized that this wasn't just about finding Thunder. It was about reclaiming everything that had been stolen from her. This was her battle, and she was going to win it. For Thunder, for Lily, and most importantly, for herself.